report to talk about, so I'll keep things fairly brief. I'll be your MC for today. My name is Mike Davis. I'm the Head of Strategic Partnerships and Communications at Infoxchange. Infoxchange, for those who don't know, is a not-for-profit social enterprise pursuing a mission of technology for social justice for over 30 years. And the State of the Technology in the Not-for-Profit Sector report is a vital way that we can provide insights into the needs of the sector and how technology is being used and key challenges and opportunities are being faced. Ultimately, this enables us to better serve the not-for-profit community through our digital capacity and capability building solutions. By way of housekeeping, you might have seen that this webinar is being recorded, and soon after its conclusion, you'll receive an early access edition of the State of the Technology in the Not-for-Profit Sector report to be officially launched on Monday, as well as a link to today's recording and further relevant links to what we're discussing today. A media release and the tech report itself will be publicly released on Monday. And if there's any media interest or you're seeking a quote or comment or further information, please contact me at mdavis@infoexchange.org. And I'll just ask Sam if you can pop that in the chat today. So given our tight schedule, we have got you all on mute today, and we just ask that you think about your questions as we go through the webinar today and just jot them down somewhere separately. And then when the time comes, I'll ask you to take those questions and pop them right into the chat if we can start to work our way through them. So great to have you all here. We might start with an acknowledgement of country, Sam, if you can flick to the next slide. Thank you very much. So I am sitting in Cremorne, the Silicon Valley of Victoria. So I want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation on lands that we're meeting today and pay my respect to their elders past, present, emerging and future. And also acknowledge that in this crazy webinar world, we're all on Aboriginal land somewhere. So if you'd like to in the chat, you can just acknowledge the traditional owners of where you are and just let us know where you're dialing in from today, because we'd love to hear also. Terrific. So I am honoured, and next slide please, Sam, today to welcome the Honourable Dr. Andrew Leigh MP to the webinar. We can just, thanks Sam. Andrew is the Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury and Federal Member for Fenner in the ACT. Andrew, for as long as I can remember, has been a great advocate and friend of our sector, and he's well placed to talk about the state and operating context of the not-for-profit sector today and the importance of digital technology for the sector. So great to have you with us, Andrew, and I'll hand over to you to take the floor.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike. And I love the way all of the traditional lands are now popping up in the chat there. I'm on Ngunnawal land, Dowra Nuna, Dowra Ngunnawal, Yungu, Nalamanyan, Dunimanyan, Ngunnawal Wari, Dowra Wari, Dindi, Wangaralenjinyin. And I want to acknowledge to any Indigenous people on the call today. Mike, thank you very much for all you're doing to help improve the digital literacy of the wonderful charity and not-for-profit sector. It is a really vital issue which comes up in so many different ways. I am the father of 3 boys and somebody who uses a lot of digital technology, and I'm acutely aware of how technologies can pull us apart. The worsening of teen mental health over the last 13 years has coincided with the rise of smartphones and social media use. And I don't think that's a coincidence. There really is a risk that we spend too much time doom scrolling, too much time clicking on likes rather than phoning a friend. And yet there's many organisations that are doing what Nick Terrell and I described as reconnecting, cyber connecting, because technologies have great potential to join us together. Some of the examples of cyber connecting that we found in researching our book were the use of technology to showcase social entrepreneurs, such as the Beechworth Bakery. During COVID, we had the benefit concerts run online by stars such as Lady Gaga. And who can forget the veteran Tom Moore, who at nearly 100 years of age did laps of his backyard, ultimately raising £30 million for charity. We were just in Darwin recently, and there a charity mentioned to us how they've found volunteer management has now become an issue where using people management software has been critical. They're an Anglican charity that looks after seafarers who come into the Darwin ports, often providing them with clothing, showers, linking them up with support services. And in managing their personnel, they've found that using people management software is absolutely critical. So that notion of cyber connecting really is at the heart of how we use digital technologies. One of the other big issues that's arising in the sector is the risk of cybersecurity attacks. The Optus attack and the Medibank data breach have highlighted the risks for charities and not-for-profits of vulnerable systems. I was just on radio this morning, and the presenter was asking about this very issue. And the capacity of many organisations in Australia isn't as good as it should be. So making sure that we're maximising the upside and minimising the downside needs to be at the heart of this. Mike, it's also an exciting day in charity not-for-profit world because today we've announced the new head of the Charities Commission. Sue Woodward, who's been at Justice Connect and who's received an AM for her work for charity, will be the next head of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. Sue will be known to many on the call because Justice Connect isn't just another not-for-profit. It's also worked as an enabler in the not-for-profit sector, assisting organisations in their start-up phase and through some of the legal challenges. I think the work of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission will be strengthened under Sue's leadership over the next 5 years, and that's going to include the work that they do in the data space. There's great potential to reduce the reporting burden on charities and not-for-profits through a report once, use often framework. We need to make sure that the charities regulator itself is cyber secure, but also that organisations have access to the technologies they need. We don't exactly know the technologies that are going to come along in the next 5 years, but we can be pretty sure that Australia will be a more tech-enabled nation at the end of Sue's term than at the beginning. And that will really be create opportunities for charities and not-for-profits to effectively use technology. This report puts a spotlight on an issue that comes up in so many of my conversations with the sector, how to improve the use of data, how to make sure that their organisations are making the most of online technologies to organise their volunteers, to manage their day-to-day business, and to seek support from the community. We're modernising the fundraising laws, which were written in a pre-internet age, an era in which going online was something you did with wet washing and a web was something that a spider wove. We understand that back in the days those charity fundraising laws were written, it might have been okay to have everything done at a state and territory level. But now, with so much fundraising being online, it's wasting up to a week of staff members' time for an organisation to register in all the different jurisdictions. That doesn't make much sense. And so the harmonisation of charitable fundraising laws reflects the changes that are happening in the digital space, and hopefully will enable new and innovative ways for organisations to engage with their philanthropic supporters, to bring those supporters along on the journey, maybe also to create opportunities for organisations to get supporters who are giving combinations of time and money. I'm a strong supporter of charities. I'm the most pro charities person I think ever to have held this portfolio. I've held it in opposition through our 9 years in opposition, and feel honoured to have been given this position when Labor won government. That's because I believe that there's so much that we need to do with the charity and not-for-profit sector. Australia today faces a decline in the volunteering rate, a drop in the joining rate, a decline in the share of Australians participating in organised activities. And if we're going to turn that around and become a more reconnected nation, we need our charities and not-for-profits, and we need them to be as tech-enabled as they can. So the work that Infoxchange does is absolutely at the heart of this important sector, whose role itself is at the heart of building an Australia in which people have more friends, are more likely to know their neighbours, more likely to help out in community groups, everything from disaster assistance to the arts, in which we're a more joined up and connected nation. So thank you to the report's authors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today on a day where I'm very excited about our new Charities Commissioner announcement, and looking forward to continuing to engage with those on the call in the months and years to come. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Assistant Minister Leigh. It's just a fascinating insight into all that's happening in the sector. And if I can take away one thing from your talk, it's the importance of human connection supported by technology connection. So important in our sector and for the broader community. So thank you so much for joining us and for your insights, and we really hope you'll hang around for some questions a little bit later. We'll now just bring on board and introduce our dynamic CEO of Infoxchange, David Spriggs, to talk in a bit more detail about some of the key findings from this year's report.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for acknowledging me as dynamic. And thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your insights, and loving having such a pro-charities minister. So thank you. And absolutely delighted to hear that news that Sue Woodward has been appointed as the new head of the ACNC. She's done such wonderful work with the sector through her role at Justice Connect, and will be a wonderful commissioner. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that with us. I would just also like to acknowledge that I'm joining this morning from the beautiful and unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and pay particular thanks to First Nations-led organisations that responded to the survey this year. As always, I think we have so much to learn. But delighted this morning to present an overview of our findings in the report. This is the 7th year that we've done this report, and it allows us to really track some of the changes over time in the sector. There's much more in the report that I'm going to be able to cover this morning. You'll probably be pleased to hear that I don't have 50 slides, but would encourage you to read the report offline, because there's so much depth in it. And before I get into the detail, I'd just like to thank all of the organisations that took the time to respond to the survey. So we had 625 organisations from across the sector respond, and this is a really detailed survey. So the fact that we have so many organisations that are taking that time is really very much appreciated. You can see kind of all shapes and sizes in terms of organisations from right across different areas of service delivery in the sector, and across Australia and New Zealand. And look at that wonderful Pablo over there. I won't be drawn on that, but I thought that was a cheeky little addition from our designer Steph into the report. So some of the key findings. So you can see some of them up on the screen, but I guess all of this is within a context, and this is within the context of the last few years. You know, we've had the COVID pandemic, we've had natural disasters playing out again right now, rising cost of living pressures, global instability. You know, Andrew talked about a number of these issues, and all of this has just put absolute enormous pressure on the sector. And I guess what I see is pleasing in that time is, despite all of those challenges, we've actually made some real progress as a sector in terms of digital transformation. So that shift that we were all forced to in remote working and hybrid working at the beginning of the pandemic saw almost an immediate uplift in the use of cloud technology, collaboration tools, ability to be able to support staff working from home and working outside traditional office environments. It's also really been an opportunity for organisations to think about how they might deliver their services differently moving forward. You know, so many community members now are more comfortable with technology like this. I always say that, you know, digital is never a replacement for face-to-face casework, but digital can certainly be used as a tool to reach more people in need. So it's been really pleasing to see over the last couple of years, we've seen a consolidation of the number of organisations moving to the cloud and that have got the infrastructure in place to support people working from home. But I guess as a result of that, we've now got some key challenges ahead. One of them is the digital skills of staff and volunteers to be able to take advantage of this new environment that we're in. Information systems to help us measure our impact across the sector. And Andrew touched on it before. I think most importantly, addressing the cybersecurity risks that we've got across the sector. So I'll dive a little bit more deeply into a few of those areas. The first one in this year's report, we're calling it Living with COVID-19. I think last year we called it Adapting to COVID-19, but we're living with COVID-19. But I think even when we're finally rid of this pandemic, the world has changed. The world is a different place. We won't just go back to a pre-COVID era. And so really important, some of these changes that we've seen. And the headline statistic there, 83% of organisations now give staff the option to work remotely. And that would have been unheard of, unthought of in pre-pandemic times across the sector. And pleasing to see on the left there that now 57% of organisations have all of the infrastructure in place. Almost another 30% are nearly there in terms of infrastructure. Just compare that back to a couple of years ago. We had 20% of organisations in the sector at the beginning of the pandemic saying they were ready to support remote working. So a huge advancement there. But as I said, kind of now the big challenge is around digital capability and skills. And we've asked the last few years in the survey what organisations think their biggest challenge is as a result of COVID. The last 2 years, it was around video conferencing, collaboration tools, supporting staff to work remotely. This year, kind of rocketed up to number one, is building the digital capability of staff and volunteers to be able to now work in this environment. And you can see some pretty troubling stats there. Only 56% of respondents are indicating that their staff have the confidence that they need to use the technology and systems that they use in their environment. A huge need for staff training. Over 50% of organisations indicated they received no training at all as they were rolling out some of these new systems. And another 39% saying they're not getting enough training. So clearly something we need to continue to focus on as a sector in terms of capacity building. Information systems, Andrew touched on this as well, kind of measuring our impact is so critical in the sector and effective use of data. And this is an area which we haven't seen change a lot in the last couple of years. And I'm really hopeful that as organisations are thinking about how they deliver their services differently, this is now an area we can focus on in terms of information systems and use of data. Because we're seeing there, 41%, only 41% of organisations are saying their systems actually allow them to understand the impact of their services. 33% of organisations are still saying they're on paper and Microsoft Office. This is 2022, and we've still got, I think, close to 10% of organisations saying they're using paper for some of their client management work. Microsoft Office, Word and Excel, they're fantastic tools, but they are not client and case management systems. So I think that's a really critical area for us to think about moving forward. And as I say, let's do it in the context of how we might be delivering our services differently moving forward. What systems do we need to manage in that environment? And then, as I said, what I think is the biggest challenge of our time now in the sector. Cybersecurity, and we shouldn't need to talk anymore about why this is important. You only need to turn on the news just about every morning and see another major organisation suffering a data breach and a cyber attack. And I think in this sector, it's more important than anywhere else, given the level of sensitive data that's held on vulnerable community members by so many organisations in the sector. This is absolutely something that can't be ignored. It certainly keeps me awake at night as the biggest issue that we've got in the sector. And why? You can see some of the stats there. Close to half of the sector don't have even any of the basics in place. No process around managing information security risks, not having an information security policy, no plans about what to do in the event of a data breach. The basics, we think it's really important, and we'll talk about this a bit later in the webinar, but offering the opportunity for staff and volunteers to be receiving cybersecurity and awareness training. And we can see almost half the sector aren't doing that. Still only 35% 35% of organisations are yet to implement multi-factor authentication. And I hate jargon, so for those that don't know what multi-factor authentication is, I know we hear it about a lot these days. That's when you're using another form of identity to prove who you are. So your phone might buzz and you might click to say, yes, I'm really trying to log into this system. So still 35% of organisations in the sector aren't using multi-factor authentication. That's improved. Last year it was 50%, but we still have a very long way to go. That should be sitting at 0. And some of the reasons you can see on the screen there for not having a secure information security policy in place. We understand organisations might not know how to go about it. We'll cover that shortly. But still 26% of organisations not thinking it's necessary or being unsure about it. This is just absolutely something we have to address as a sector. And finishing off the summary of the report, just on some of the top priorities and challenges that were identified in the survey, and there's more than these in the report, but just these are the top ones. So top priorities are still around website and digital marketing, and there's a whole section in the report covering that in terms of the progress the sector's made and some of the challenges. But really pleasing to see things like digital capabilities and improving information security have increased in recent years in terms of priority. Because for me, information security and capability is more important than digital marketing and the website. If we don't have those core foundations in place, we're putting our organisations at risk. Some of the challenges, I think the number one challenge for the entire 7 years of doing the report, this will come as no surprise to anyone, is budget and funding. But it's pleasing to see that organisations are now prioritising this more. So in this year's report, we saw a 30% increase in IT spending by Australian not-for-profits in 2022 compared to 2021. So that's a significant uplift, and I think a real recognition that the sector and boards and management are acknowledging the importance of this. It's also been good to see government step up, when the New South Wales government with their Social Sector Transformation Fund has been funding a lot of these initiatives for organisations. And the other key ones around access to resources, staff capability we've talked about. Really pleasing to see for the first time on this list, improving the user experience and accessibility for people with a disability, accessing organisations' websites and applications. So really pleasing. So that's a high-level overview of some of the findings. As I say, please read the full report. We're going to switch gears now a little bit and talk about, well, what can we do to address some of these challenges as a sector? And my colleague Sophie is going to speak shortly about the work we've been doing on the Digital Transformation Hub. So this is something we launched last year. And it's really all about how can we help. It's a free resource and it's available for not-for-profits to help them on that digital transformation journey. So fine to say we've got massive problems with information security. Well, what are we doing in terms of putting resources out there for the sector? I'm really pleased that we've had over 10,000 organisations make use of the hub and be supported by the hub just in the last year alone. So clearly there's a demand for it. And to finish my piece, I just really wanted to say a huge thank you to all of the partners and supporters that have contributed to this hub. This is about much more than Infoxchange. You can see all of the organisations on the slide there. It was led by absolutely the best of philanthropy, the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. We'll hear from Dr. Catherine Brown later, but Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation and Gandel Philanthropy getting on from the beginning, saying this is something critical that we need to support for the sector. It provided immediate funding to allow us to get it in place. We then saw it scaling up with the support of government, which was very welcome, and then coming on board some of the largest tech companies, consulting firms, and then all shapes and sizes of tech firms, consulting, universities and others, peak bodies that really wanted to support the sector. And all of these organisations have been so generous, not just in financial support, but a lot of the in-kind and volunteer support that they've provided. So from me, a huge thank you to all of those organisations that have made that possible. But so enough from me, but thank you very much everybody for joining us this morning. And we look forward to seeing you back for Q&A in a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks so much, David. What a huge amount of insights to digest and take away on a Friday morning. And I know people will be excited to read more about this in the report. And from my own perspective, I just want to say it's great to be involved with an organisation that's doing the research, but then actually taking action to address some of the problems identified in that research. Very important part of the response. So we'll now turn to welcome Sophie, our digital transformation consultant at Infoxchange, who's going to speak a little bit about how we can support not-for-profits to build digital capability, utilising the Digital Transformation Hub and more. Welcome, Sophie.
Thanks so much, Mike. And firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the Wurundjeri land, and it's such a pleasure to be talking today and take all that information that Dave has just brought in and show how we can put that into action. So I get the fun slides in theory. So publishing the results for the tech survey is a really exciting time for Infoxchange, but additionally for the Digital Transformation Hub. These results that we've discussed, they inform our activities, but they also give us an opportunity to reflect on the conversations we're having with non-for-profits at the moment. If you're new to the Hub, firstly, hello. As we've mentioned, the Hub brings together tangible web resources, capability building programs, and tailored advice in what we call a one-stop shop, our website. We've been available for about 12 months, and in that time, we've supported the scores of over 10,000 organisations to take the next step with their digital transformation. I'll get you to jump to the next slide. Thanks, Sam. Within the Hub, we navigate this technology landscape with what we sort of call 5 domains. So tech foundations, information systems, digital marketing, IT management, and info security. And you'll see that as you go through the report as well. We have experts in that space within our team and additional support with expert volunteers to be able to create content and guides to help you take your next steps. We then use the advisory service to bring those resources to life and apply them to your project or challenge at hand. So over the last 12 months, we've seen that the tech foundations have been some of our most popular resources. And this is likely reflective of the 78% that we were talking about earlier that are planning to move to the cloud or are already there. When we're speaking with these non-for-profits, we're sort of seeing 2 types of challenges. So we're seeing, firstly, advice in refining their migration. So they've sort of partially there, but now we're having internal conversations about file structures or accessing discounts or ensuring that they've got the right partners in place to reach their technology foundation goals. So that style of conversation we're definitely having it with a number of non-for-profits. The second type is building those staff skills to confidently use the collaboration tools that Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace offer. So what we have been doing with Connecting Up is running Lunch and Learn Microsoft Team webinars. So these really aim at the fundamentals of Microsoft Teams. So, very simple how to share screens, how you can share screens in different ways, that these tasks might be intuitive to others, but it gives space there where people have lower digital capability to ask questions and ask questions to us who can give them the best practice tips and apply that in their next meeting. And so we're seeing great growth in that space by having the Lunch and Learns. And if you're not feeling confident in the Microsoft Teams space at the moment, I definitely recommend jumping on some of those. We also have organisations approach us with quite discrete activities. So they, for example, need help picking a new information system. Commonly, this is about the third that are still using Microsoft products. For those that are partners to the non-for-profit sector, yes, this is still a real statistic and we still get inquiries on a regular basis about this. For those in the sector, it's okay. We're here to help and unpack that for you and help create next steps. So what we will do is we'll talk you through the 4-step process to selecting an information system, and we've got the article there linked on the slide as well. And then we'll use a series of templates and resources to guide you through the process of shortlisting those potential solutions and conducting demonstrations to get a selected solution. Our aim for you is that when you enter the market and you're looking at systems, You have an understanding of what you require of the solution, and you flip that conversations with the sales team at the provider, and it's about, is it fit for purpose? And it's always a joy to see the growth that organisations will go through when they're looking for a new information system. It can be daunting, but this is where the resources are here to help you. We also have a number of organisations that just don't know where to start. And once again, we're here. It's a challenge. They're challenged across all of the domains, but don't know what's the most important to start with. So what we run is a digital health check where we will evaluate your environment, benchmark you against IT spend and staff satisfaction against the non-for-profit sector, and then we'll create a series of recommended initiatives to implement over the next 12 months. So we'll take into account what's most important for you and what your priority is there. As Andrew and David have both highlighted, in the recent data breaches that are going on, cyber is one of the most important things that we bring into just about every conversation we have and the opportunity to do so. The first two things I always ask organisations is, do you have multi-factor authentication turned on? Exactly what David explained earlier. And when was the last time you ran phishing training with your staff? Your staff are your biggest asset, but in the cyber world, they can be your biggest liability. So making sure they have familiarity with the risks of phishing, and I can safely say that we run cyber training for free via Connecting Up. So if you haven't run that, jump on, subscribe, and get the staff and IT managers into those webinars. By talking through each of those domains and what trends we're seeing from the report and the services we're seeing with the hub, we have a range of services that we can offer you. And I'll jump to the next slide. Thanks there. So firstly, we have a digital capability assessment on the website. So this will help understand your environment. It's a quiz that you can jump on, explore opportunities to improve, and recommended articles to build your digital capability. We've also got the training resources, so the guides. So they're designed to be relatively short to give you that next tangible step. We've also got a bunch of training resources. What's fantastic about the non-for-profit sector is there is a lot of tech partners that want to help, including Connecting Up, to give a whole broad range of training there. So jump on there, explore what training is relevant for your team. And the technology discounts. We want to help you maximize your IT spend wherever possible. So there's a broad range of tech discounts you may be eligible for. And then the main bit, expert advice. Come speak to us. I love talking to non-for-profits and understanding where they're at and how we can get them to that next step. So you'll be speaking with myself or a member of my team to actually unpack any of these challenges that you're having further. And if that's all feeling a little bit overwhelming, jump and read the case studies. See how other people have done it. We've got great case studies there that explain positions that you might be in right now and how they've transformed their team to that next step, and they're now using technology in new ways. Jump on the website, complete the assessment, explore the guides that are relevant to you, and book time with us. And we're here to help you through your digital transformation. Great. I'll pass back to you, Mike.
Sophie, thank you so much for taking us through a little introduction to the Digital Transformation Hub that hopefully makes it a lot more tangible and accessible to our listeners and community. And do urge you to jump on the website and connect with Marcus and Sophie, just wonderful team making it all tick behind the scenes. So I'm very pleased now to welcome Dr. Catherine Brown OAM, CEO of Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, to join us. Catherine's been a long-term friend of Infoxchange and a key player in the sector supporting digital skills and capability. So welcome, Catherine.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just here to add a bit of a perspective as a funder and also some of the work in the digital area that is clearly emerging and clearly critical for the community. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining from Wurundjeri land and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and also acknowledge the Assistant Minister for Charities, Andrew Leigh, and wonderful David Spriggs, your dynamic CEO. We have to say that again. So the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, just to set the scene, we're essentially the community foundation for Greater Melbourne. And since 1923, we've been working on the big issues of the day. And at the moment, we see those as economic inclusion, affordable housing and climate change. So they're the big areas we're funding in. And we also know that for those areas to be addressed, we need a strong charitable sector. And so we actually have a specific area of work, which I'm particularly passionate about building the capacity of the whole sector. And so we monitor what's happening. And it was very clear at the start of COVID, and I attended many consultations with others from the not-for-profit sector about what was happening. It was clear that the digital capability of the not-for-profit sector was a critical issue. And I think at the time, only 36% of the not-for-profit sector were satisfied or better with their digital technology environment. So that was a concern. We had funded Infoxchange previously for an Ask Izzy upgrade, but I did hear David speaking about the potential for a digital transformation hub at a number of meetings, and then followed up with him and said, okay, well, what would that actually be? How would that work? Can you actually design it and put a proposal together? So that's kind of where it started. And once we got the proposal, we also worked with Gandel Foundation. So together we provided the seed funding to make the idea what it is today, the Digital Transformation Hub. And I think maybe to just cast back to COVID, it's probably hard to remember in a way because it's all become a blur. But from my perspective, I think one of the most shocking things, apart from the fact that the not-for-profit sector wasn't ready really, or 2/3 weren't quite ready with their digital capability, they were also dealing with huge demand for support. So, there were many people who were unemployed for the first time in their life, and many people who suffered housing stress and, great anxiety about whether they'd be able to stay in their accommodation for the first time. And then also we had really basic things like, international students looking for food, etc. So, it was really pretty tough time, and probably being a Melburnian, we went through many lockdowns, and it's been a big plus that the not-for-profit sector's been so resilient and so important through all of this. So the outcomes of you've heard about the hub have been huge. So there was more than 10,000 people or organisations have accessed resources and products this year, and many have accessed the capability programs. One of my favourite is the Accidental Tech Manager training for people who suddenly find themselves having to deal with the digital world. And overall, I think a 25% increase in digital skills, and that perhaps is more because I think that's August figures. So then Infoxchange talked to us and said, well, we actually think we're going really well and there's just a massive demand. And I noticed in the chat there's people from New Zealand, and I've actually seen the data, and I know there are people all over the world actually using the hub, which is pretty fantastic in a way, as long as all the Aussies get what they need. So we talked about some further funding. So the first funding was in November 2020, and then we've made a further grant, and that's commenced in July. So that's the next upgrade, and to keep improving the service. And they've been developing the digital health check, which is just a fantastic step forward. And I actually take part in kind of quarterly meetings with just helping, like just the funding advisory kind of group, to see how it's tracking. And it's really one of the most impressive projects we've funded. So I thought just to, give my perspective a bit further, some of the other digital projects that we've funded relate to the COVID response, but also to now extend into housing, disaster support and employment and more. I mentioned the upgrade of Ask Izzy at the beginning of COVID, and that was critical. And for those who don't know, Ask Izzy is a platform that Infoxchange hosts for health and community services across Australia. So if you need information and you are suddenly unemployed or you are suddenly facing homelessness and so on, then, and also have vast amount of health information too, it actually isn't government funded, so it required really urgent work. So that was really a very we were happy to support that. And then also Justice Connect's Dear Landlord project, which we funded since inception really, in our affordable housing program, and it's assisted 84,000 people so far, which is just amazing. We had a meeting with them last week. That has been wonderful all through COVID and all through our affordable housing, challenge that we have. It's also expanding into legal services for family violence, and just wonderful example of service delivery. Another digital tool which has been critical in the housing space is the housing access rating tool called HEART, which was developed by the School of Design at Melbourne University. And it actually can assess whether a site for affordable housing will be close to everything that's needed. So that can be everything from a school, hospitals and medical services, green space, most importantly public transport, shops and so on. So there's no point placing housing where there aren't services and that people need. Another, just a couple more examples, another important one as we think about disasters and disaster recovery, and obviously we've been through bushfires and now flooding, is Gather My Crew, which is an app we've also funded since its inception. And it allows people to get their crew together in a time of crisis, and that can be a personal crisis or it can be in a community disaster situation like we've been through. And you can go online and ask for and help provide support. So it's very much what Andrew Leigh was mentioning about connection. It's a very important tool for connecting people at a time of crisis. And then if we look more into employment, which is another area we're very passionate about, and social enterprise, Higher Up is a wonderful platform that we have been both a grant supporter to, but also an impact investor in. That's a platform that matches people with disabilities with carers so they can go to work or go to education or participate in the community. It's been a most wonderful platform. And when we first funded that, that was kind of a really groundbreaking service. And recently we've also funded Australian Spatial Analytics, which is a program of Whitebox, and that's also using digital expertise to create employment. And they moved to Melbourne recently. Jigsaw, which is another social enterprise, which is working on a digital document management systems, and it's expanded into Melbourne and created 82 new jobs. And then Ability Works is another wonderful and very innovative organisation we funded. They have a records management digital service, and we provided capacity building funding for them so that they were ready to take on a very big Department of Defence contract, and that created 25 new jobs. So, I mean, I see the digital world as important for connection, important for new employment opportunities, and then important in times of crisis and when people really need help with, in a disaster or if they're facing homelessness. So amongst many other things, we've also funded some amazing things in health too. So all I can say is this is just a wonderful thing, the Digital Transformation Hub. Well done to Infoxchange and the Digital Transformation Hub team. And we look forward to continuing to work together on this and other digital projects in the sector. So thank you.
Catherine, thank you so much for your very insightful words about the important role that philanthropy's played, and LMCF in particular also around supporting the charitable sector in its time of need, and just speaking also to the resilience of the sector too, which is vital. We've got a moment now for you to start popping some of your questions, you've been very patient as an audience, so thank you. If you could start popping your questions in the chat. David's just going to run through some quick thank yous, and then we can open it up to the presenters, which will be great.
Thank you, Mike, and I will be quick because we're very fortunate to still have the Minister with us. So please put your questions in the chat so we can get to that. Yeah, I had a couple of big thank yous on the what next, and if we can go to the next slide there. Sam, the first one is, and Catherine just alluded to it, but the Digital Transformation Hub has been a massive cross-sector support, and the founding partners were Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation and Gandel Foundation. But we are absolutely delighted to announce, as Catherine said, Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation have just committed to another 2 years of funding for the hub. And I was so delighted last Friday to get an email and a phone call from Gandel Foundation indicating that they are putting in another major grant to support the next stage of the development of the hub. So from my side, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to both Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation and Gandel Foundation for their ongoing support. We've seen the need today, and it's just so wonderful to see philanthropy and our other partners coming together to continue to support the hub. So thank you so much to Catherine and to the CEO of Gandel Foundation, Fedrin. The next one, again, I'll be quick, so I know we've got questions coming, but this is really super exciting, and this is hot off the press literally this week. Is that the Paul Ramsay Foundation is supporting an extension to the Digital Transformation Hub to build a data catalyst network in the sector. And I think this is absolutely critical. We've been talking about it earlier. We heard from Andrew the importance of impact measurement and data in the sector. So this is going to be a network of organisations who want to improve their use of data in the sector, their impact measurement, and we'll be developing a whole set of tools and resources and assessment tools similar to what Sophie showed earlier on the hub, all around the use of data and impact measurement. So more to come on that in the month or two ahead, but a huge call out and a massive thank you to the Paul Ramsay Foundation for their support of what is some absolutely critical work for us to do as a what next. But I'll shut up now. Thank you, and we'd love to have some questions from you. So I'll pass back to Mike.
Thanks very much, David. And I just want to reflect on really interesting thing that Assistant Minister Leigh once said to me on a podcast, and he quoted the Stoic Epictetus in saying, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." So I'm sorry, Andrew, that we haven't provided the full 22 plus minutes for questions, but I think it's a good amount of time for everyone to pop in their questions and have a chat. I'll read these as they come through and sort of direct them to the right place. Shirley in the chat is asking, doesn't going to the cloud increase the risk of cybersecurity risks? Surely need to NFP not-for-profits to be more than ready for the risk component of such choice. And that might be one, I think, for David or Sophie.
Happy to take it while my camera is on, and for Sophie to add to that. But a call out certainly to visit our Digital Transformation Hub to learn about that. So from our perspective, it's about being aware of what those risks are and addressing it during the implementation. I guess what we found for most organisations, though, in moving to the cloud, it's actually significantly enhanced their information security posture. So for a lot of organisations, that's enabled them to quickly enable things like multi-factor authentication on the phone by using some of those more modern cloud-based services, compared to when things like, your email server used to sit underneath somebody's desk in the corner of an office. And so certainly there's risks there, and you need to be aware of that, and we've got some resources to help you with that. But I think it's actually been one of the factors that's enabled us to generally increase the level of information security in the sector.
Completely agree with you, David. And I think that there's the education with staff and bringing everyone on the journey when we're talking about moving to the cloud and changing your technology environment. That needs to be that education around cyber and how it's going to change. There's some really great resources on the hub that will unpack that for you and help your staff and yourself move through the transition.
Terrific answer. Thank you so much, David and Sophie. We've got a really good question coming in from Amy, who says the results from the survey report outline improving user experience and accessibility of apps and websites as a challenge. Do you have any resources to support not-for-profits to address this challenge? That might be a good one for Sophie.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a couple of different apps that you can use. The first point of call will be talking to your web developer and having a chat with them about which ones they prefer to use to evaluate your website and optimize it accordingly. There is also a resource on the hub that references a whole range of digital marketing resources and tools that you can go and explore further and see which ones are fit for your use.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sophie. Love some more questions. In the absence of any more questions, I might put a question to Assistant Minister Andrew Leigh, if he's still there. And that's just around moving forward and talking about community connection and the role that technology can play. What do you see as some of the more exciting developments in the space beyond what we've talked about today?
Well, thanks, Mike. And I love any mention of Epictetus, so a great way to be wrapping things up. I'm really excited by the potential of helping people better use their devices. One of the things, and this probably comes from my perspective as a parent as much as my perspective as an assistant minister, but I do feel as though suddenly we've been thrown these devices and apps designed by some of the smartest people in the world to hook our attention and distract us from the physical world. And it's not surprising that many of us have fallen into the addictive trap of using our devices too much and engaging with one another too little. The initial response has been to say, well, this is just an issue of your own moral ability to deal with it. And so let's show you how to control your time and cut yourself off after a certain period, and let's play games like both when you're at dinner, both people put their phone down on the table. First person to touch their phone pays the bill. But that whole personal responsibility thing probably isn't enough, and I think we need more systematic solutions. One of the things I really love about this conversation is that the goal isn't to get us to spend more time on our devices. The goal is to build a more connected, healthier and happier society. So if we have that lens to it, I'm really optimistic about what we're going to be able to do to turn around some of these trends of declining, joining, volunteering and donating. We're not going to get rid of our smartphones, but we've got to have a big community conversation about how to use them better if we're to have more mental well-being among Australia's teens, more engagement among our charitable sector.
Thank you so much. And I might just tack on a question from Lana and also ask for Catherine's input on this one, just to hear the thoughts around how the sector improves its approach to attracting talent and enabling support from greater digital transformation. So maybe Assistant Minister Leigh, if you could go first, and then Dr. Brown second.
Yeah, so I think for the sector, it is often about prioritising among scarce budgets. Many organisations are operating off the smell of an oily rag, and so to update IT systems isn't necessarily the top priority. One of the gains I think to be had is from collaboration across organisations, potentially sharing resources on the back end and finding opportunities to move to more cost-effective platforms. My sense is we're going to be doing a lot more in the cloud. Certainly, that's the move that government has taken. My own data storage now, I feel much more comfortable having things in the cloud than sitting on physical devices. And increasingly, that's going to be able to deliver better cybersecurity and lower running costs at the same time.
Terrific. Thank you, Assistant Minister. And Dr. Brownie, are you there to also offer an insight there?
I will try to. It's a very big question. So I think in terms of attracting talent to the sector, and a lot of it is to do with using technology to be really efficient and to really learn the things you need to know. And free up time for people to be actually working on, the service delivery. So, like there's just so many tools. We've been through the sort of arduous journey ourselves of, business transformation, and now we have a CRM to do our impact reporting from the grants, and we use Razor's Edge for our fundraising and so on. And that is actually very efficient when you start to use it every day. But to attract talent, it's tricky with IT because it's such a well-paid area. So you really have to often, if you can't have a whole person, you have to use the digital hub, and we actually use Infoxchange as our advisors. But also I think you just try and offer upskilling and training, and if someone wants to go further, you know, academically in that area, that's to be encouraged. So really, people who come into this sector, purpose is what drives them. You know, the purpose, you know, to get out and make our country a better, more inclusive and safe and sustainable, you know, with COP27 going on, country. And so I think that's the first motivation for people in this sector. And then we really need to be efficient and have great technology to help us do our jobs very well and reach more people, which is really possible. I mean, you've seen that with the hub. I mean, I just think the talent, if Australia was run by the not-for-profit sector, we would be even more brilliant.
Wonderful response, Dr. Brown, and thank you, Assistant Minister Leigh. Also, we've got we might finish with one last question before we run out of time. And this one will be for David. The cost of CRMs are challenging when we have a number of very part-time people working with us. Any suggestions for securing lower cost options? And that's from Joanne Law.
Yeah, no, thank you. A great question. And just to back into the previous one as well, I love those comments. So thank you, Catherine and Andrew. And we need to be talking about the benefits of the sector. Look at the wonderful work that this sector does. And if you're an IT graduate, why would you want to go and work on the next core system for a big bank when you could come and change the world in the sector? That's the positive messaging we need out there to bring people into our sector. But sorry, the cost of CRM systems is a perfect segue to say, please go and visit the hub and book in a session with Sophie. I received a lovely letter in the mail a couple of weeks ago from the chair of a volunteer-led organisation that does prison ministry in New South Wales, entirely volunteer-based, and was singing the praises of Sophie and our team, that they'd actually helped them select and implement a CRM system to support their volunteers. They never thought that would be possible because they don't have any money, and they never thought that they would get there. And our team was able to give them some advice and get them started on that journey. And they've now been able to implement that system. But I think kind of be clear around what it is you're looking for and what your key needs are. And then our team's certainly there to help and support. I don't know, Sophie, whether you want to jump in quickly on that as well.
Yeah. Thanks, David, for mentioning that. There was a very kind letter we received. And exactly what David said, come and have a chat with us, because there is some nuances within the CRM space about what style and requirements you need for your service delivery or your solution needs. And we can unpack that with you together. There is also some recommended systems that we've seen other non-for-profits successfully use on one of our discount pages in the hub. So the key point is jump on the hub, explore it, and then book time with us and we can unpack it further with you.
Very well said, Sophie and David, and thank you so much. And Marcus has just made the great point in the chat there that you can book an appointment with the Expert Bar, which is a free resource, very much like walking into the Apple store and getting an appointment at the Expert Bar, except not just for Apple products, online and free for the entire sector. So I would love to see you there. I want to thank everyone for being part of the webinar. We promised to try and finish on time at 12. Special thank you to our presenters, Dr. Catherine Brown OAM and Assistant Minister Leigh for being part of everything. And you can expect to receive everything from this webinar, the recording, the links, and everything involved today in an email coming a few hours after the session. And look out for the official release of the report on Monday. In the interim, feel free to email me or contact anyone at Infoxchange for more information. My email is mdavis@infoxchange.org or jump on the website. And a big thank you again, and enjoy a wonderfully sunny Friday if you're in Melbourne, and if you're elsewhere, enjoy the day no matter what the weather is. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.